everyone and welcome back to a new video. My name is Maddie and in today's video I'm going to talk to you about 13 dark fiction books that I look forward to reading. Dark fiction, like horror books or thrillers or mystery, are my favorite genre to read. So considering that Halloween is approaching, I figured I would share with you guys some books that I look forward to reading. To make this a little bit of a different video than a lot of the videos that I've seen with horror recommendations, I decided to try to focus on literature from around the world, specifically literature in translation. So I try to compile a list of books from different countries, written originally in different languages and translated into English, that fall into one of those genres that I just mentioned earlier. I generally like reading books from all over the world because I just love reading about different cultures and trying to see the world through different perspectives. And I feel books are a great way to open people's eyes to different cultures around us. And horror is one of those genres that is deeply rooted in culture, deeply rooted in folklore. So it's very interesting to read horror books from around the world. So now I'm going to get into the books with you. I am going to mention 13 books and they're each from different countries. I try not to include more than one book per country. And without further ado, let us get into the books. So the first book that I'm really looking forward to read, it is a straight up horror and it is a huge chunker of a book, and it is The Shapeshifters by Stefan Spjut. This novel was originally published in Swedish in 2012 and was translated by Susan Beard in 2015 in English. And from my knowledge of it, it is a story focused on like a lot of Swedish mythology, like the trolls. The plot focuses on some disappearances of children in this rural area in Sweden, and someone decides to follow their trail and discover if the legends that they're being kidnapped by trolls are real or there's something else going on. And it sounds absolutely fascinating. It is a huge book though, which is why I haven't picked it up yet. It feels very intimidating because it's so long, but I do feel that once I'm going to just build up the courage to pick this up, I'm probably gonna fly through it because it sounds like a really catchy story. The next book is not quite a horror as much as it is a thriller, and that is Perfect Days by Rafael Montes. This is a Brazilian book and it was published and translated in 2016, and it was translated by Alison Entrekin. When this came out, it received a lot of hype because it follows a similar plot as the book You by Caroline Kepnes. Well, not quite a similar plot, but I guess the main character was compared a lot to Joe in You, and since that book was so well received, this book received a lot of attention. It centers around this like psychopath man who abducts a woman and takes her to Brazil to be his girlfriend. I was not such a die-hard fan of You. I enjoyed it, but I didn't really understand the crazy hype going around it. So I kind of put this off. Even though I bought it, I kind of put off reading this just simply because it didn't make it to my priority list. But I do look forward to reading it. The next book is a collection of short stories from Japan, and it is Dark Water by Koji Suzuki. This one was published in 1996. And I don't seem to find the translator's name inside the book, so I'm going to add it to the video after I research it. Like I said, this is a collection of short stories. The title story, Dark Water, was made into a very famous J-horror movie, which was also remade into an American horror movie. I was not a huge fan of the American remake, but I did like the Japanese movie adaptation quite a lot. For the longest time, I thought this was a novel, not a collection of short stories, so I thought Dark Water was just the novel. So I guess I wasn't really eager to pick it up because I knew the story, I knew the plot from the movie. But once I realized that this was actually a collection of short stories, I went ahead and I bought it. Koji Suzuki is also the author of the Ring series, so he is a pretty established horror writer in Japan and around the world. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm probably going to start reading this during the 48-hour Japanese readathon horror edition, which is, depending on when I put this video up, very soon. The last book that I actually have a physical copy of is another collection of short stories, and this time it is from South Korea, and it is Flowers of Mold by Ha Sung-nan, and it is translated from Korean by Janet Hong. This one I believe came out like 2 years ago at Open Letter Press, and I just bought this collection a couple months ago for Women in Translation Month. The description of the stories made me think of Yoko Ogawa's stories. The back of the book says that the stories are very pleasant on the surface, but as you read on, there's this kind of lurking darkness in each story, and that really made me think of The Diving Pool and Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. Ogawa is one of my favorite authors from Japan, simply because she manages to capture this kind of darkness that just lurks in just everyday descriptions. So when I read the description of Flowers of Mold and that just sprang into my mind, I thought for sure I need to get this book and read it. These are the only books that I actually own physical copies of. The other books that I'm going to be mentioning now are just books that I've done research online and found very interesting. Some of them are available on Kindle Unlimited, and some of them are available on Hoopla through at least my library. I don't know if the selection on Hoopla is different according to library branch. I would just check out digital resources as well if you're interested in them. But anyway, let's get into the books. Since we are already in Asia, I'm going to stick in Asia for the next book. The next book is from China, and it is Valley of Terror by Zhao Haohui, and it is translated by Bonnie Hui. This one was originally published in China in 2015 and was translated into English in 2017. And it is a novel that, according to the synopsis, is centered on an epidemic. People start dying from a fear disease, and then people that survive that fear disease speak about demonic presences in the city where they live. Goodreads also mentioned that it is a mix of horror and history of China and superstitions in China. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying about how horror is rooted in this folklore of each individual country. And this just sparks my interest for that. I love reading about different superstitions in different countries and how people follow these superstitions. So I'm really interested in this. And I also read another book by Zhao Haohui at the beginning of the year. It was a police procedural, but I really enjoyed his writing style. The pace of his writing was very upbeat, so I look forward to reading this as well. The next book on this list is from Haiti, and it is Adrienne in My Dreams by Renée Depestre, and it is translated by Kayama L. Glover. This book was originally published in 1988 in French, and it was translated in 2017 into English. Apparently, it is an iconic piece of Haitian literature, and it mixes ghosts and zombies, and it is described as a book filled with eroticism and voodoo. Yeah, I'm interested. It sounds good. And I don't think I've ever read a book from Haiti before, so it is really interesting. And I know this one is available on Hoopla, and it is also pretty short. A lot of these books are actually very short. Some I would even say they're considered to be novellas. The next book is also considered to be one of the most iconic works in its country of origin, and it is The Blind Owl by Sadeh Hidayat. This one was translated by D.P. Costello, and it is from Iran. It was published in 1936, and it was translated into English in 1944. The book focuses on a young man that loses a lover and starts drifting into madness, and it is more of a psychological horror, I guess. I have read quite a few novels from Iran in translation, and I did enjoy all of the ones I read, so I look very much forward to reading this. In novels where people kind of tend to lose their mind and become very paranoid and spiral into madness are a type of novel that I really kind of enjoy reading. So, looking forward to it also. The next novel on this list is also written quite a while ago, and it is from Egypt. The novel is Women in Point Zero by Nawal El Sadawi, and it is translated by Sharif Hetara. This one was written in 1975 and was translated into English in 1984. It follows a woman in prison who's been sentenced to die for killing a pimp, and she opens up and tells us the story of her life, her dark life, and how she ended up from her childhood to where she is now. I've heard this described as psychological horror, so I'm really interested in picking it up. It's also described as a piece of feminist fiction, as it talks a lot about the situation of women in Egypt at the times. So it sounds very interesting. Next up, we have another book that is described to be like, again, spiraling into madness and paranoia and not knowing much of what's going on, that is true or a dream. And it is Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. This one was written in 2014 and it was published and it translated into English in 2017, and it is from Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. I know the author was born in Argentina, but on her bio it says she now lives in Germany, but I believe this is considered Argentinian fiction. So this one follows a woman who wakes up in a hospital, I think, and she doesn't remember how she got there. I'm not exactly sure. I've heard that the more you read about what it's about, the more spoilery it gets. So I kind of tried to get away from descriptions of this book, but I did hear this mentioned by a lot of people that it's a very good book and that it is very short, and that once you start reading it, you get immersed into it and you kind of just fly through it, and then you stop reading it because you're done and then you don't really know what you read. So that sounds like an interesting experience to me. I really like putting myself through these kind of situations where I read and then I don't know what I read, and I question everything I read. I'm the same with movies. I love ambiguity. I love not really knowing what just happened. So this sounds like right up my alley. Next up, we have a book from Colombia, and it is The Children by Carolina Sanin. This one is translated by Nick Caster. It was originally published in 2014 and translated into English in 2017, and it follows a woman that finds a young child that just kind of appears out of the blue. He doesn't seem to belong anywhere. He doesn't seem to have any origins. No one is aware of his identity. So she goes on a quest to find out who this child is, and things get complicated. I don't know about you guys, but children in horror creep me out. This sounds really interesting. So the next book also has to do with kids, and it is from Spain. It is called Such Small Hands and is written by Andre Barba and translated by Lisa Dillman. And this book was originally published in 2008 and translated into English in 2018. And it seems to follow a young girl that arrives at an orphanage in Spain, but apparently she's very weird, and she starts playing a game with the other kids that involves a lot of violence. But orphanage setting, that means a lot of kids, so that scares me even more. That's why I'm looking forward to it. Next up, I have another one from Europe, and specifically from Germany, and it is called You Should Have Left by Daniel Kaufman, and it is translated from German by Ross Benjamin. This one follows a writer who goes to a cabin with his family, his wife and young daughter, kids again. So this writer with his wife and young daughter go to a cabin for him to be able to work on his writing, and then inexplicable things start happening that make him question his sanity. And it sounds interesting. Isolated settings always make for good horror, in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to that. Last but not least, we have a thriller, definitely disturbing. This one sounds very interesting, and it's been on my Amazon wishlist for the longest time, and it is called African Psycho. It is written by Alain Mabanku and translated by Christine Schwartz Hartley. This book is from the Republic of the Congo, and it was written there in 2003 and translated into English in 2007. And this book follows a young man who is creating a very elaborate plan to kill his girlfriend. And in creating his plan, he feels he needs mentorship. So he decides to get that mentorship from a dead serial killer. And, you know, sure. Yeah. I believe the title is an homage to American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. And that is one of my favorite books. I have not revisited that book for a longest time, but when I read it, my mind was blown and I really enjoyed it. So I think that an homage to it, I'm not sure if the book itself is an homage to it or just the title is an homage to it, but it is enough to draw my attention. So this has been it for 13 dark books that I would like to read, hopefully soon. If you guys enjoy dark fiction and you have recommendations from all over the world, not just in translation, but originally written in English as well, I would love to read about them in the comments. I'm always on the lookout for great books, and I do get a lot of my recommendations from other readers like yourselves, so I would love to hear from you. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, and if you think there's one over the other that I should prioritize in my reading. And I will see you again in my next video, which I know is going to be another Japanese reading vlog. The Halloween weekend is the horror edition of the Japanese readathon. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye. I apologize if I'm making a mess of everyone's names.